coincidence that Father Brandon celebrates his ordination in First Mass on the Feast of Corpus Christi, the feast of the body and blood of Jesus Christ. God works in those things. It may be just the day that Bishop Troutman's schedule worked out or Brandon's schedule worked out, but I believe God works in that because the priesthood is intimately tied to the Eucharist. If you think of a priest, and you think of what a priest does, I'm guaranteeing that number one on the list is celebrating the Mass. That's the first thing that we would think of. I even had several parishioners in the short year that I've been a priest say to me, it must be nice, you celebrate Mass and then you can take the rest of the day off. I assure you that's not true. There's many other things a priest does. But the Eucharist is central to all of it. Everything flows from that celebration of the Mass. Everything comes out of that gift of the sacrament of the body and blood of Jesus Christ. And I think that tells us very much about what we celebrate with Father Brandon's priesthood and with the priesthood in general. That Christ sacrificed himself. He gave himself for us. Sacrifice has been part of human religion almost from the beginning. This idea of offering things to appease a God, of giving so that a God would do something for us. It sometimes took the ugly form of human sacrifice, of actually taking a person and offering them to please some God. But when God was establishing his relationship with humanity, especially for the people of Israel, the people of the Old Covenant, he had sacrifices. They offered sacrifices to him of animals. And more than just saying, please do something good for us, please make things go our way, these sacrifices said, this is in our place. The blood of this animal, the body of this animal, was saying, take us, take everything we are. And God was saying in return, he will be their God. He'll be their Father. In the first reading we heard of Moses sprinkling the blood of the sacrifice on all the people of Israel once they agreed to the covenant. They were connected to God. They were family now. They were his and he was theirs. But as we know, humanity is not perfect. We're broken, we're fallen, we're selfish. And despite all of our good intentions, we can't keep up that end of the bargain. We can't keep up that end of the covenant. And so it took God stepping in himself, God coming down among us to fulfill that covenant, to make us one with him, to make us truly family. So in the person of Jesus, God walked with us. He taught us. He shared what love really was. And in the end, he gave himself, everything he was, his body, his blood, his soul, and his divinity, for us on the cross. He offered it all back to the Father. He offered his humanity to the Father in a way that we never could and never can. And at the Last Supper, because Jesus is truly God as well as truly man, when he said, take this is my body, and drink this is my blood, that's what happened. Just as when God spoke and said, let there be light, there was light. When Jesus said, this is my body, this is my blood, that's what happened. And that is the sacrifice that Brandon gets to celebrate at this Mass and at every Mass for the rest of his priesthood. He couldn't do that yesterday. If Deacon Brandon Klecker went to this altar yesterday and said all the same words and did all the right actions, we don't believe anything would happen. Because that's, as it says in the ordination liturgy, he's been configured to Christ. He's been able to act in the person of Christ, especially in the sacraments and especially in the Eucharist. And it's not because he's a nice guy, that we can all agree he's a nice guy. It's not because he was a good seminarian. He studied really hard. I can attest to that most of the time. And it's not even because he's a holy guy, because he prays a lot, because he's sincere in his love for God. It's because Father Brandon was chosen. He was chosen by God to lay down his life, just as Christ laid down his life. When Father Brandon laid on that marble floor in the cathedral last night, he was accepting the cross. When Bishop Troutman put his hands on Brandon's head, and all these other priests put their hands on his head, he was accepting the crown of thorns. When the bishop anointed Brandon's hands with oil so that he could perform these sacred actions, he was accepting the nails of the cross. And not to suffer, not to be sort of a sufferer for everyone else, but as a sacrifice. Just as Christ laid down his life for every single one of us, Brandon laid down his life for the church, specifically for the church of Erie. And so whatever he does, it flows out of that sacrifice. I don't want to scandalize anyone, but priests aren't perfect. I'm sorry, I had to tell them. Priests make mistakes. Priests can be selfish. Priests can be egotistical. But because that sacrifice that Father Brandon made is united with the sacrifice of Christ, it's lifted up into that heavenly worship. Christ's sacrifice is one with Brandon's sacrifice. And because of that, God will do great things. He won't be perfect all the time. But because he gave his life, God will use that. And so keep giving yourself, Brandon, as you're going to pray in just a few minutes in the Eucharistic prayer. Christ says, my blood will be poured out for the forgiveness of sins. Pour yourself out. And I guarantee, although I have little experience to speak of it, you'll have a happy and more importantly joyful, fruitful, and especially faithful priesthood. For the rest of us, God gave us himself completely. In the Eucharist that we'll receive today, he gives us himself, everything he is, as a gift in the humble forms of bread and wine. The only response we can have is to give everything back.